Free or enslaved black women during the Civil War. Enslaved black women began to make their transition into freedom. Some women tried to negotiate their freedom while others ran to the Union and stayed in contraband camps. These camps were low on clothes and shelter but high in illnesses. Many soldiers abused the women there, and they had to use the resilience they learned from slavery to get through it. Some women worked there as songstresses or seamstresses. Others took this time to learn how to read and write. The women who could write, like Sojourner Truth and Sarah Parker Remond, sent petitions for anti-slavery. Remond went to England to get international support for the cause. White women also wanted to help since they thought African American rights and the women's rights movement were both fighting for equality to white males. Some white women did not fight for African American rights past slavery since they thought that while slavery was inhumane, white people were still more evolved than black people. White women in the North during the Civil War. Women were also seamstresses and laundresses in the Union lines. About 400 women got involved in the fighting by disguising themselves as men. Northern aid societies established schools for both children and adults to attend. Many Northern women had to fill in the gaps left by their male family members. They went to work in factories or desk jobs. Some women worked in sanitary commissions organized by Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell. 7,000 chapters in this sanitary commission raised more than $50 million and provided food, medical supplies, and clothing to the soldiers. Other women might have joined the National Women's League to help abolish slavery and send petitions to Congress. White women in the South. Non-slaveholding women had to fill in the gaps left by male family members. Many had to go into war to get financial help, whether this was actual fighting or just being seamstresses and laundresses. Other women, like Carrie McGavock, stayed home and turned her home into a hospital for Confederate dead and sick. McGavock's house turned into a cemetery after the Civil War. Slaveholding women had to tend to the farms and manage the slaves who were growing resistant to white power. Overall, there were shortages of food and clothing, but an increase for basic goods. Bread riots sprout out as women began to oppose this new development. The end of the war brought relief, as well as many widows and depletion of young men for women to marry.
At the beginning of the war, nurses were merely volunteers who showed up at military hospitals. But after the Battle of Bull Run, Clara Barton and Dorothy Dix organized a nursing corps to help care for the wounded corpses. Women of all classes worked. This was rich women, middle-class women, Northern free African Americans, and African American contrabands. Contrabands were slaves who fled into Union lines and put to work in camp hospitals. In the antebellum South, women usually served as nurses within their own family. On large plantations, the master's wife nursed her husband, children, and slaves. When Fort Sumter was fired upon and the wounded and dying were pouring in from the battlefields, the South found itself unprepared to care for its casualties.
Women of the South began to organize their own volunteer groups to provide proper medical care for the wounded and ill soldiers of the Confederacy.
Lastly, they were also expected to serve as a mother figure to the soldiers.